My name is Nora Blake. I'm 33 years old. And I used to believe that being good, being kind, loyal, dependable, would somehow protect me from the worst in people. That if I loved hard enough, gave enough, forgave enough, it would all come back to me. But life doesn't work that way. I was a trauma nurse for nearly a decade. I worked the night shifts most people ran from, high-pressure, adrenaline-soaked hours where 1 second could mean the difference between life and death. I was steady, reliable, the kind of nurse who never flinched at blood or screaming or bones sticking out of skin. I was the one families looked to when they were falling apart. I held strangers' hands as they took their last breaths. I comforted mothers after sons didn't make it. I went home with the smell of antiseptic still in my hair and bruises on my feet from standing so long. And when I walked through that front door after a 14-hour shift, I used to believe I was stepping into safety. Into the arms of someone who saw me, appreciated me. Jacob, my husband. He was warm and charming when we met. He made me laugh, brought me coffee in the mornings, told me he admired how hard I worked. He said he loved my dedication, my fire. He made promises about our future, about building something real together. We got married after a year. Small ceremony. Just a few friends. I was in love. Blindingly. Jacob had dreams of his own. He wanted to open a gym, a high-end fitness studio, as he called it. But he didn't have the money, or the credit, or, really, the patience to start from scratch. So I helped. I dipped into my savings, took out a personal loan under my name, picked up overtime shifts and skipped every vacation just to support him. I believed in him. And I believed that one day, when things were stable, he'd do the same for me. But slowly things shifted. He stopped waiting up for me after shifts. Stopped asking about my day. He always seemed distracted, distant. Some nights I'd walk in the door and he wouldn't even look up from his phone. I told myself it was stress. That maybe he felt pressure to prove himself. I gave him space. I gave him everything. One night, I came home after a double shift. Blood on my scrubs, my eyes stinging from exhaustion. A teenager had bled out on the table earlier, stabbed in the chest. I'd done compressions with my whole body. It didn't matter. We lost him. I stood in the trauma bay after, staring at the ceiling, just breathing. And when I finally got home, Jacob didn't say a word. He was on a Zoom call laughing. Champagne on the table. 2 glasses. I stood in the hallway, invisible. I didn't even have the strength to ask. A few weeks later, I found a hotel receipt in his coat pocket. One night. Executive suite. Spa service. A name that wasn't mine. I asked him, quietly, shaking, "Are you seeing someone?" He laughed in my face. Said I was paranoid. Said I was working too much and starting to imagine things. And for some pathetic reason. I apologized. I let it go. I let it slide. Because I didn't want to believe the man I'd built a life with was capable of something so cruel. Then the accident happened. It was raining hard that morning. I was driving home, barely able to keep my eyes open. The roads were slick. My hands were numb from exhaustion. A truck ran a red light. They told me later it hit me at over 60 miles an hour. I don't remember the impact. I remember the sensation of floating. Darkness. Silence. And then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Confused. Disoriented. Tubes in my arms. My body wrapped in pain. The nurse told me I'd been in a coma for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And Jacob? Gone. He'd visited once, they said. Left after 15 minutes. 3 weeks into my coma, he signed over my medical decisions to the state. Told the doctors he couldn't handle the stress. That he needed to focus on his own healing. He never came back. Never called. Never even asked if I lived. I wasn't a wife to him. I was a burden. An inconvenience. Something to discard when I no longer served his goals. I spent the next 2 months in physical therapy, learning to walk again. I was healing in a public rehab facility because Jacob had taken me off our insurance plan. I had nothing. No home. No savings. No explanation. Just silence. And the slow, agonizing realization that the man I gave everything to left me to die. That was the moment Nora Blake, the wife, the believer, the helper, stopped existing. And something else took her place. Not anger. Not grief. Something colder. Something clearer. I was going to get up. I was going to come back. And Jacob was going to learn that the woman he abandoned in a hospital bed was no longer the same one who walked down the aisle 6 years ago. Because this time, I wasn't coming home with love in my heart. I was coming with fire. The first thing I had to learn again was how to breathe. Not just mechanically, I mean really breathe. Slowly. Deeply. Like I deserved the air in my lungs. Because for weeks after the accident, I didn't feel human. I felt like debris. Something shattered on the side of the road. Scraped off the pavement and forgotten once the sirens faded. The doctors told me it was a miracle I survived. That the crash should have killed me instantly. They didn't say it, but I could hear the unspoken part. Maybe it would have been easier. I spent 42 days in that hospital, barely able to lift my own head. I had 6 fractures in my left leg, a dislocated hip, 2 broken ribs, a torn ligament in my shoulder, and a long angry scar that started just beneath my collarbone and curved down to my stomach like someone had carved it there with a knife. I couldn't recognize my body anymore. And then there was the other pain, the kind that doesn't show up on a chart. The kind that lives in silence. Jacob never came. Not once. Not to check on me. Not to see if I could walk. Or breathe. Or speak. Nothing. No flowers. No calls. No letters. I found out from a nurse, a kind older woman named Camille, that he'd given the hospital some excuse about not being emotionally equipped to handle my recovery. Then he stopped answering their calls. He just disappeared. Except he didn't really disappear. Because a week later, I was shown a picture. It was on a phone. Camille whispered before showing me, "You might not want to see this." But I said I needed to. It was Jacob. Smiling. On a boat. With a woman sitting in his lap. Blonde. Tan. Laughing. The caption read, "Sometimes life gives you second chances. Take them." And the comments? All hearts. All fire emojis. All fake congratulations. None of them knew I was alive. None of them knew I had been in that car wreck because I was driving home from picking up the anniversary gift I had made for him. A leather-bound journal, engraved with the words, "For every year we survived." I'd spent 3 days writing a letter inside it. Every page was a memory, a piece of us. Or at least what I thought us used to be. I don't know if it was thrown away or burned or sitting in some unopened box labeled charity. But I do know this. That woman in the photo with Jacob? Her name was Sabrina Carlisle. And she wasn't just some new fling. She used to come to our house. For dinner. For drinks. For advice. She called me her older sister even though we weren't related. She knew me. She hugged me. She thanked me for setting the bar for what love should look like. And now? She was sleeping in my bed. Wearing the robe I left hanging in the bathroom. Drinking from the mug I bought on our honeymoon. Everything that used to be mine, she was living in it now like it never belonged to anyone else. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know how many times Jacob had done this before. The emotional manipulation. The charming lies. The way he'd build you up just to tear you down, brick by brick, until you were a hollow version of the woman he first met. I was the last one standing. Barely. But I was still standing. That meant something. After I left the hospital, I had nowhere to go. The house was gone, sold while I was still in a coma. My name had never been on the deed. Jacob always said putting it solely in his name was for tax reasons. I believed him. I always did. So I stayed at a rehab center, a place for trauma recovery patients who didn't have family to care for them. I was, apparently, family to no one. I worked hard every single day, relearning how to walk, how to bathe, how to lift my own arms above my head. The therapists were kind, but they also looked at me with pity, like I was a sad little case study in broken trust and broken bones. I refused to be pitied. I applied for government housing, got a tiny apartment on the 2nd floor of a building with flickering hallway lights and a broken elevator. I took a job doing admin work at a health clinic, nothing fancy, just scheduling appointments and answering phones. But it gave me structure, purpose, and most importantly, access. You'd be surprised how much information people share when they think you're invisible. One night, I created a burner social media account. Nothing fancy, a free stock photo as the profile picture, a quote about self-growth in the bio. I followed Sabrina, commented on a few of her fitness posts. It didn't take long before she followed back. People like her? They crave admiration. They don't bet compliments. They absorb them like sunlight. Through her posts, I started piecing everything together. They had moved into a new house. My house at first, then they upgraded to something even bigger. The down payment? That came from our savings account. Yes, our account. The one Jacob drained while I was lying unconscious. He'd taken my half and used it to build a new life. I saw a photo of their living room. My eyes zoomed in on the background, the shelves, the vase, the chair, the blanket I knitted that one summer I had pneumonia. All of it was still there. All of it was mine. And they were smiling like none of it had ever meant anything. But the most chilling post came one night. A photo of their hands. Hers on top of his. The caption? He saved me from a life that wasn't mine. Now we're rewriting our future together. That was the night I stopped feeling sad. That was the night I made a promise to myself. They thought I had died in that crash. They treated my survival like an inconvenience. But I wasn't just alive. I was evolving. And I had nothing left to lose. They stole everything from me, my home, my marriage, my dignity. So I decided I'd take something back. Not the stuff. Not the money. Not the reputation. Something deeper. I was going to make sure Jacob saw me again. Not as his wife. Not as a victim. But as the reckoning he never saw coming. It started small. Just a single letter. Handwritten. No name. No return address. No threats. Just 7 words. Does she know what he did to me? I mailed it to their house on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, using gloves when I wrote and mailed it. No fingerprints. No trace. I imagined Sabrina reading it. I imagined the tightening in her chest, the curiosity blooming into suspicion. I imagined her trying to brush it off, only to lie awake that night and wonder what it meant. People like Jacob thrive on illusions. On loyalty. On being the rescuer. But all it takes is one crack, one tiny fracture in the fantasy, and suddenly the whole thing begins to shake. The second letter came a week later. This time, I enclosed a copy of a hotel bill from 2 years ago. A receipt Jacob had begged me to burn after I found it in the laundry, charged to his name, dated the same weekend I'd been visiting my dying aunt in hospice. 1 queen bed. 2 guests. Room service for 2. Champagne and strawberries. I'd kept it. Now, I let Sabrina see it. Again, no signature. Just a sticky note stuck to the top. He told me I was the only one too. I didn't hear anything for a while after that. But I knew how this worked. Doubt is slow. It spreads like ink in water. And people like Jacob? They always reveal themselves when they feel the pressure build. So I waited. In the meantime, I got stronger. I joined a trauma support group, not just to heal, but to listen. To learn how women like me reclaimed their stories. I met others who had been financially gutted, emotionally drained, erased and discarded like they never mattered. And yet they still showed up. Still fought. Still had fire in their eyes. That fire woke something up in me. I started running again. First a block. Then 2. Then around the park. My left leg still ached when it rained, but I pushed through it. Every drop of sweat felt like I was shedding Jacob's lies from under my skin. I even took a self-defense class, not because I planned to use it, but because I wanted my body to feel like mine again. One night, during a group session, I shared part of my story for the first time. I didn't name names, but I talked about what it's like to be gaslit so long you start apologizing for your own breath. And when I finished, a woman across the circle, maybe in her 60s, leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. You're not broken. You're reborn. That was the night I stopped calling myself a victim. I wasn't the girl Jacob abandoned in that hospital bed anymore. I was someone new. And knew me had a plan. I created a new identity online, someone confident, well-read, discreet. A woman who consulted on PR crises for high-profile clients. I followed Jacob's business account. He followed back. Of course he did. Men like him never resist admiration, especially when it looks expensive. Within days, he messaged. I still remember the first line he sent. You look like someone who appreciates discretion. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled. I responded politely, playfully, letting him lead the conversation. Within a week, he was telling me about Sabrina's emotional outbursts, how she was becoming paranoid, how he might need someone more grounded. He was baiting a hook. He had no idea I was holding the reel. I kept the conversation going, gathering screenshots of everything he said. The flirtations, the hints at cheating, the complaints about his unstable partner. Then I printed them, neatly, organized by date, bound them in a simple folder, and I mailed them to Sabrina. No note this time. The evidence was loud enough. 3 days later, Sabrina deleted her social media. 5 days after that, I saw a moving truck in front of their house. And then, finally, after months of silence, I got a message. An anonymous email. No greeting. No signature. Just a single sentence. I hope you find peace. I never will. It had to be her. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't finished. Jacob still thought I was a stranger online. Still thought he was in control. So I set up a meeting. A fake consultation. Booked it under the name Natalie Bell. Rented a sleek office downtown for the day. Hired an actress to pose as a receptionist. Made everything look pristine. And then I waited. He arrived right on time. Cocky. Smiling. Wearing that same cologne I once bought him for our 3rd anniversary. I let him sit for 5 minutes. Then I walked into the room. No makeup. No heels. Just me. He froze. I watched the blood drain from his face. Hello, Jacob, I said calmly. Do you remember me? He stammered something, but I raised my hand. I don't need apologies, I told him. I don't need explanations. I leaned forward. I just wanted you to see what survival looks like. He stood, tried to speak again, but I was already walking away. Because I'd said what I came to say. And Jacob? He would have to live with knowing that the woman he tried to destroy had risen from the ashes with a spine of steel. After I walked away from Jacob, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel free. I didn't even feel angry anymore. What I felt was empty. You think when you finally stand up to someone who's broken you over and over, it'll feel like the world shifts. That everything wrong will fall back into place. But the world didn't shift. It just went quiet. I went home that night and sat on the floor of my living room. The same spot I used to curl up in while waiting for him to come home, terrified of what version of him would walk through the door. Would he be sweet? Distant? Cruel? Would I have to tiptoe or freeze? Now, the door stayed closed. But the fear echoed anyway. I sat there in silence until morning light started to pour through the window. No TV. No phone. Just my heartbeat and the memory of everything I had tolerated. And, for the first time, I really looked around. The house still carried him. His cologne had settled into the pillows. His books lined the shelves. The coat he left behind still hung near the door. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a museum of my own erasure. So I started taking it back. It began slowly. I tossed out old photos, tore pages from journals that made excuses for him. I threw away every item that carried his fingerprints, every sweater he bought, every cheap gift he used as a bandage after another betrayal. There was one drawer I had always avoided, one I told myself I'd clean later. But that night, I pulled it open. Inside, buried beneath receipts and expired credit cards, was a small box. I didn't recognize it at first. When I opened it, my breath caught in my chest. It was a letter, folded neatly, the envelope blank. But I knew exactly what it was. I had written it 3 years ago, on the night he left me alone in the ER. After the pain. After the fear. After the nurse asked me, in that careful tone, "Are you safe at home?" I remember going home and writing until my hands cramped. Not to him. To me. The words were jagged. Emotional. Raw. If you survive this, don't forget who did this to you. Don't romanticize the wounds. Don't wait for someone to save you. Become the woman who doesn't need rescuing. And when you find your voice again, use it. Loudly. I don't remember crying when I first wrote it, but I cried reading it now, because I had survived, and I was finally ready to use my voice. That night, I opened my laptop and started typing. I didn't even know what the final form would be. A blog? A memoir? I didn't care. I just needed to pour it out. I wrote everything, every betrayal, every manipulation, every night I questioned whether I was the problem. I wrote about the isolation, the lies. The day I found messages between Jacob and the one person I thought I could trust, my best friend, Rachel. I didn't hold back. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the silence had nearly killed me. I wrote for weeks. Every night. Sometimes until dawn. My fingers were blistered, my eyes red. But something inside me was waking up, something that had been asleep for years. When I finished the first draft, I stared at it like it was a mirror. For the first time in a long time, I saw me. Not the broken version. Not the people pleaser. Not the woman who needed someone else to define her. Just Nora. Strong. Scarred. Alive. I sent the draft to 3 small publishers. No name. No bio. Just a pen name and a note. This is not a story. It's a truth too many of us carry alone. I expected rejection. But 2 weeks later, one of them replied. A woman editor. She said she stayed up all night reading it. That she cried. That she saw her younger self in my words. She said, if you're willing, I want to publish this. Just as it is. We kept it anonymous. No photo. No tour. No interviews. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted connection. The book came out under the title Unseen Fire. It started small, but it spread. Quietly. Like a whisper passed between women who'd never been heard before. And then, the letters started coming. Emails. Messages. Handwritten notes from strangers. Women who said, I thought I was the only one. You told my story. You gave me the courage to leave. And I answered every single one. No name. No signature. Just this. You are not what they did to you. You are what you survived. One afternoon, I received a small envelope. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single photo. It was Jacob, sitting alone on a bench, staring at the ground. Weathered. Hollow-eyed. His shoulders slumped like the world had finally turned away from him. On the back, 4 words were written. He finally feels small. I don't know who sent it. I didn't ask. I looked at that photo for a long time, and then I smiled. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I didn't feel anything anymore. No fear. No longing. No rage. Just freedom. I slid the photo into the back cover of Unseen Fire. A reminder of what I walked through. And what I walked away from. Because this story, my story, isn't about him anymore. It's about the fire they couldn't put out. The voice they tried to bury. And the woman who came back louder than ever. After the book came out, Unseen Fire, everything changed. Not instantly, not dramatically. But like the slow shifting of seasons. People started looking at me differently. Not with pity, but with a kind of reverence I didn't quite know how to receive. The messages poured in from women, from survivors, from daughters, from strangers who said they saw themselves in my pain and in my fight. Some wrote paragraphs. Some wrote one line. You told the truth I've never dared to say out loud. And even with all that, even with the media coverage, the interviews, the book tour, a part of me still felt haunted. Like Jacob had left something behind inside me. Not fear anymore. Not even hatred. But residue. A stain. A weight I hadn't quite managed to shake off. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I left. I sold the house, the place where I'd spent too many nights crying on the bathroom floor, where every corner whispered memories I didn't want. I packed what little I still owned into 2 suitcases and drove out of the city. No big farewell. No announcements. Just goodbye. I ended up in a tiny coastal town about 5 hours north. No chain stores, no traffic lights. Just salt air, tall grass, and a bookstore with creaky floorboards that sold cinnamon tea in the back corner. The kind of place where nobody knew me. And more importantly, nobody needed anything from me. I bought a small, weathered cottage on the edge of a cliff. It had chipped white paint and a porch swing that groaned when you sat on it. But it was mine. And it was quiet. And it was safe. I remember my first night there. The silence felt unnatural at first. Like something was missing. I kept waiting for the familiar hum of tension, the feeling of needing to flinch. But it never came. I left the windows open and let the sea breeze in. I fell asleep to the sound of waves and nothing else. It was the first time I had slept through the night in years. Every morning, I made coffee barefoot in the kitchen. I lit candles, even when it wasn't necessary. I played music I used to love before Jacob told me it was too emotional. I took long walks down to the shoreline, letting the wind tangle my hair and the cold air sting my face. I started to feel real again. Not like a ghost of who I used to be. Not like someone trying to outrun her story. But like a woman rebuilding, brick by brick, from the inside out. But healing doesn't always mean isolation. So I found a shelter in town, a small, underfunded space for women escaping abuse. I never told them who I was. I volunteered under a fake name. They didn't need to know I wrote a book. What they needed was someone who understood the silence between words. The look in someone's eyes when they say, "I'm fine," and you know they're not. I didn't try to save anyone. I just sat. I listened. I offered stories not my own, but the ones I'd collected. The ones that reminded them they weren't alone. Some nights, after those long, heavy days, I'd drive down to a cliff near my house and scream. Just once. Loud. Raw. Just to remind myself I had a voice. And that Jacob didn't own it anymore. Then one rainy afternoon, something shifted again. The storm had blown out a section of my back steps. I called a local repair guy, not expecting anything, just needing the work done. His name was Theo. Quiet, thoughtful, tall, with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd built things that mattered. We barely spoke at first. Just simple things, where should I set the beam? Or, do you want the railing stained? But there was something unspoken between us. A calm. A steadiness. A man who wasn't trying to impress or control or fix me. He came back a few days later to finish the job, even though I didn't ask him to. It was raining again. He stood under the porch, soaking wet, jacket over his head. When I opened the door, he just looked at me and said, "I didn't want you to be alone tonight." And I didn't send him away. We started slow. Coffee on the porch. Walks down to the water. He never pried. Never asked why I flinched when someone touched my shoulder too suddenly. Never pushed me to talk. He let me come to him. And when I finally did, when I told him about the nights I thought I'd disappear, about the voice that had almost been taken from me, he didn't look away. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. He held my hand and said something I'll never forget. "You're not broken, Nora. You're just rebuilding. And I'd be honored to help if you'll let me." That was the first time I cried in front of someone without shame. Because love, real love, isn't loud. It's not control. It's not jealousy or rage dressed up as passion. It's quiet. Safe. Patient. Theo never tried to save me. He just stayed. And for the first time in my life, I started to believe I was allowed to be whole. Not perfect. Not healed completely. But whole. And that was everything. I had started to believe I could finally live without flinching. The days had taken on a gentle rhythm, something I'd never known before. I woke to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks, sunlight spilling through linen curtains, and the faint smell of salt and fresh coffee drifting in from the kitchen. Theo had begun staying over more often, and with him came an ease I hadn't realized I was craving. His presence didn't demand anything from me. It just fit. He didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. He didn't rush me toward a future or drag me back into a past. He just stood beside me, quietly, patiently, like someone who knew I needed space, but didn't want to walk it alone. One morning, we sat in silence on the porch, sipping our coffee. I watched the sea while he read a worn paperback he'd picked up from the little bookshop in town. My hand brushed his, and instead of pulling away like I used to, I let it stay there. It was the first time I really thought, maybe this is what peace feels like. But peace, as I've learned, is fragile. And mine was shattered by something so small and quiet, I almost didn't notice it. A plain envelope. No return address. Just my name written in slightly messy, slanted handwriting. It was sitting on the porch table when we came back from a walk. Theo didn't notice it at first. I did. And the moment I saw the way the N in Nora curled, something in my stomach twisted. I knew that handwriting. I hadn't seen it in over 2 years, but I'd know it anywhere. Celia. Jacob's sister. I hadn't heard from her since the trial. Since the day I stood in court and told the world what her brother had done to me. She had been there, sitting stiffly in the third row behind the defense, her eyes avoiding mine the entire time. She never said a word to me. Not then. Not after. She just disappeared. And now she was back in my hands. I waited until Theo left for the bookstore before I opened the letter. I needed to be alone. Inside were 2 pages, neatly folded. I unfolded them with trembling fingers. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I found the courage to send it. It took me longer than it should have. I'm sorry for that. I want to start by saying I believe you. I always did. And I know that's not enough. It's not enough to make up for my silence. It's not enough to erase the damage. But it's the truth. I saw things I never should have ignored. The bruises. The way your smile changed. The way your voice shrank around him. And still, I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean to admit that my brother was capable of what you said. Afraid of what it said about me, too, that I let it happen. After the trial, I left everything behind. I changed my name. I cut ties with my parents, with everyone who stood by Jacob. I started therapy. I started over. But I never stopped thinking about you. I'm not writing this because I want your forgiveness. I know I might not deserve it. I'm writing because the silence has weighed on me for too long. And because I hope, even if we never speak again, that you know you weren't alone. I believed you. I still do. Celia. I read it once. Then again. And again. Until the words blurred together, and I had to press my palms to my eyes just to steady myself. I didn't know how to feel. There was a part of me, the broken girl inside, that had waited years to hear those words. To hear someone who mattered say, I saw you. I should have helped you. I didn't. But there was another part of me, the part one had rebuilt from ash, that didn't trust it. Where was this letter when I was testifying? Where was this apology when I was curled up in a stranger's shelter, trying to find the strength to keep breathing? Why now? Why now, when I was finally finding peace? I didn't tell Theo about the letter that night. I just folded it back up, slowly, carefully, and placed it on my nightstand. It felt like a ghost had come back. Not to haunt me, but to ask me to choose between letting the past drift farther away or opening the door again, just a crack. I didn't know what to do. For days, the letter sat there untouched. Every time I passed it, I felt that ache, old wounds stirring. A version of me I thought I'd buried whispering, what if she means it? What if she's the only one who ever did? Finally, I told Theo. I read the letter out loud to him while we sat by the fire. When I finished, he didn't say much. He just looked at me and said gently, closure doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means understanding that you're allowed to move forward without answers. He was right. I don't know if I'll ever reach out to Celia. But I know this. Her silence once broke me. Now her words, however late, no longer define me. They don't hold power anymore. I do. And that's enough for now. I used to think that when the dust finally settled, peace would follow. That after all the battles, the betrayals, the courtrooms, and the headlines, I'd finally breathe in quiet like a gift. But the thing no one tells you about survival is that silence is never truly silent. That morning started like any other. The wind outside was soft, brushing over the trees like a lullaby. I was barefoot, sipping coffee, still in Theo's oversized hoodie, staring out the window at the fog crawling up from the valley below. It was our quiet place, miles from the world that once swallowed me whole. Then came the knock. 3 times. Sharp. Precise. Not hesitant, not friendly. Theo was out getting supplies. He'd left before sunrise. We weren't expecting anyone. Out here, people didn't knock unless something was wrong. I didn't grab a weapon, but I thought about it. Old habits. My heart had already started thudding by the time I opened the door. And there he was. Liam Hale. I hadn't seen him since the trial. Back then, he was just a ghost in the gallery, slipping out before the cameras could catch him. Jacob's best friend. His shadow. He looked like someone who had been hollowed out by time. Gaunt cheeks. Nervous fingers. Eyes that didn't quite meet mine. But there was a flicker of something else too, desperation, maybe even fear. I didn't invite him in. I just stood there, hand on the doorframe, ready to shut it. "Hi, Nora," he said softly, voice rough like he hadn't used it much. "I didn't think you'd still be here." I didn't answer. He swallowed hard. "I need 5 minutes. That's all. Then you'll never see me again." I should have closed the door. But I didn't. Because something about the way he stood, like a man on the edge, told me he wasn't here to beg forgiveness. So I let him in. He stepped across the threshold like it burned to touch. He didn't sit. Just stood there in the middle of the kitchen, hands trembling slightly as he looked around at the quiet life I'd rebuilt. "I've been clean," he said. 2 years. Rehab. Therapy. I'm not the same guy. But some things won't let go of me. I crossed my arms. "What do you want, Liam?" He looked up then. Finally. And the words came out fast, like he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. It wasn't just Jacob. The air went still. I didn't breathe. He kept going. There was a network. A group. Men with money, power. Hiding behind fake charities, fake scholarships, church fronts. Jacob was their middleman. The one who made things happen quietly. You bringing him down? It scared them. But they buried it. Fast. Paid off anyone they had to. Threatened the rest. And me. I was part of it. Not like him, but enough. Enough to drown in guilt every night. I stared at him. My fingers clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can't carry it anymore. And because I think they're coming for me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small plastic bag, sealed tight. Inside was a flash drive. "This has everything I saved. Names, dates, transactions, emails, pictures. Things that could bring all of them down if it got out. I kept it in case I ever needed leverage. But now, I don't care what happens to me. I care what happens if no one else ever sees this." He extended it to me. I didn't want it. God, I didn't want it. But I took it. And the moment my fingers closed around that flash drive, I knew peace wasn't real. "I don't forgive you," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know." Then he turned and left. No goodbye. Just silence and fog swallowing him down the road. I stood there for a long time, the drive burning in my hand. Part of me wanted to throw it into the fire. Pretend I never saw him. Pretend this chapter was closed. But I knew better. I hadn't just survived. I'd learned. And now I had something they couldn't afford for me to hold. This wasn't over. Not yet. And this time, I wouldn't just expose one monster. I'd burn the whole rotten empire to the ground. I didn't open the flash drive that night. I couldn't. It just sat there on the table like a loaded weapon, silent but heavy with the weight of every name, every secret Liam had warned me about. I stared at it for hours. I even tried to distract myself, made tea, folded laundry, reorganized the bookshelf like it mattered, but every time I passed the kitchen, it pulled at me. Theo came home just after sunset. I didn't tell him right away. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I wasn't ready to say the words out loud. Saying them would mean dragging us both back into the dark. But he noticed. He always does. We were eating quietly, the kind of comfortable silence only two people who've been through hell together can share. Then he looked at me, brow furrowed just slightly. "You're too quiet," he said. "Even for you." I didn't answer. I just reached behind me and slid the flash drive across the table. He didn't touch it. Not yet. But his expression shifted, the calm in his eyes replaced with that low, tense focus he only used when things turned serious. "Liam Hale came by," I said finally. Theo sat back, his jaw tightening. "You're kidding." I shook my head. "He says Jacob wasn't acting alone. There's a whole ring. Powerful people. And that drive," I nodded toward it, "has proof." He stared at it, then looked back at me. "Do you trust him?" "No," I said honestly. "But I believe him." Theo exhaled slowly, then picked up the drive. We didn't sleep that night. We plugged it into an offline laptop, one Theo had rigged for security months ago. No internet connection. No risks. The folder was labeled, "If something happens to me." Inside, there were hundreds of files. Spreadsheets. Bank statements. Scanned documents. Photos. And names. So many names. Judges. Police captains. CEOs. 2 senators. A bishop. One file even contained detailed records of payoffs to families who had lost their children to supposed accidents, drownings, car crashes, overdoses, all staged to cover the trafficking that had swallowed them whole. I wanted to vomit. Some of the files were dated as far back as 1999, which meant this ring had been operating for decades, completely undetected, or worse, protected. But it was one name, buried deep in a subfolder called Internal Contacts, that stopped me cold. Victoria Bain. My mentor. The woman who'd taken me in after I escaped Jacob. The one who ran the Survivor Network. Who built safe houses. Who looked me in the eyes 3 years ago and said, "You are safe now." My chest tightened so fast it felt like drowning. She had a file. A full file. Bank deposits from shadow corporations tied to Jacob. Travel records that matched trafficking routes. Even a contract, God, an actual contract, signed under an alias I recognized. I'd seen it once on a fake ID she kept in her wallet, just in case. I couldn't breathe. It felt like betrayal layered over betrayal, like the walls I had rebuilt were crumbling in real time. Theo leaned in slowly, reading over my shoulder. He didn't say anything at first. Just reached out and gently took my hand. "I don't understand," I whispered. "She saved me." "No," Theo said. "She found you. But maybe saving you was never the goal." 1,000 memories flashed through my mind, the times she warned me not to dig too deep, the way she always intercepted sensitive messages, how certain women in the program suddenly disappeared without explanation, and we were told they left for healing. What if they didn't? What if they were taken again? I sat back in my chair, shaking. "She's still out there," I murmured. "Still running everything." Theo looked at me, and I saw the decision forming in his eyes before he even said it. "Then we burn it all. We go public. Not like before, no court cases. We leak it full scale. Anonymous dumps. Journalists. Whistleblower networks. I nodded slowly, but part of me was still frozen in that one thought. Victoria wasn't just part of it. She was one of the architects. And now I had proof. I stared out the window as the sun began to rise. This was bigger than Jacob. Bigger than revenge. This was war. And this time, I wouldn't be the girl begging for justice. I'd be the storm knocking at their door. It took me exactly 6 days to find Victoria. 6 days of digging into old messages, forgotten emails, and encrypted backups Theo helped restore. 6 days of following the digital breadcrumbs she never meant to leave behind. She had gone underground, but she wasn't invisible. No one ever is, not really. She was in Montana. A private estate, 3 hours outside Missoula. Registered under a shell company. Gated. Guarded. Remote enough to make someone disappear without leaving a trace. But I wasn't coming to disappear. I was coming to be seen. Theo didn't want me to go alone. But I needed to. This wasn't just about information or revenge anymore. This was personal. She had looked me in the eyes. She had held me when I cried. She had said the words that saved me, "You are safe now." And all along, she was the monster hiding under the floorboards. I took a train to avoid tracking, then rented a truck with cash from a fake ID I hadn't used in 2 years. The closer I got to the estate, the colder it felt, like the trees themselves knew something ugly lived beyond their reach. It was almost midnight when I pulled up near the property line. I left the truck and hiked the rest of the way on foot, weaving through pine and frozen air until I reached the edge of her fence. Security cameras dotted the gate. But I wasn't there to sneak in. I was there to knock. So I did. 3 loud hits with the butt of my flashlight. The noise echoed like thunder through the trees. 2 minutes later, a man opened the gate. Tall. Armed. Unimpressed. "Private property," he grunted. "Tell Victoria Blake has come to see her," I said. He narrowed his eyes. "Blake." "Nora Blake," I said clearly. "Tell her the girl she tried to break is here." He hesitated, then stepped back, speaking into a mic clipped to his jacket. I heard static, then silence, then a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Let her in." The gate opened like the jaws of something ancient. I walked in. She met me on the porch, wrapped in a gray shawl like she hadn't aged a day. Her silver hair glowed in the moonlight. Her eyes, those same soft, practiced eyes, met mine without surprise. "Nora," she said, almost warmly. "You look, well." "Don't," I snapped. "You don't get to act like this is a reunion." She tilted her head. "I assumed you'd come eventually." "Did you?" I stepped closer. "Before or after you sold out the women you swore to protect?" For a moment, her mask cracked. Just for a moment. She didn't deny it. Didn't pretend. Instead, she walked past me and sat on the porch steps. "I gave them hope," she said. "For a little while. That's more than most ever got." I froze. "You used them," I hissed. "You gave them hope so you could control them. Profit from them. Discard them." "I gave them safety," she said coldly. "In a world where safety is an illusion." "No. You gave them a cage. A prettier one. One with soft pillows and therapy sessions and candles that masked the rot underneath. But it was still a cage. And you knew it." She looked up at me. "I did what I had to do to survive." "So did I said. "But I never hurt anyone to do it." Silence stretched between us. I pulled a small envelope from my coat and tossed it at her feet. "Inside is everything," I said. "The evidence. The money trail. Your partners. Your contracts." "You wouldn't dare." "It's already been sent," I interrupted. "To 5 investigative journalists. To advocacy groups. To survivors. Your little empire is already crumbling. And no matter how many guards you have or how much land you hide on, the truth is louder than you are now." Victoria stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You were supposed to break," she said softly. I did, I replied. And then I rebuilt myself. Stronger. Smarter. Louder. I turned and walked down the steps. She didn't follow. She didn't call my name. She knew it was over. Back at the truck, my hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. But it wasn't fear this time. It was release. The final thread had snapped. The last ghost exposed. There would be legal battles now. Headlines. Maybe even arrests. But none of that mattered as much as the moment I left her there, sitting in the ruins of her lies. Because that moment belonged to me. The survivor. The fighter. The woman they couldn't silence. 3 weeks had passed since the verdict. Victoria Hale, the woman who once stood above us in polished heels and whispered poison behind closed doors, was sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. Her empire, once wrapped in soft colors and empty promises, was gutted from the inside out. The clinics were shut down. The wellness centers that funneled girls into her system were exposed and raided. Civil suits were piling up. Foundations that had donated to her mental health programs were now tripping over themselves to distance their names from hers. But I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt hollow, quiet, like a battlefield after the dust settles. Theo and I had left the city for a while, retreating to a remote cabin tucked deep in the Catskills. It was quiet up there, almost too quiet. No sirens. No headlines. No whispers. Just wind through the trees and the steady hum of insects in the tall grass. Theo thought I needed peace. And I appreciated that. I truly did. But peace isn't just silence. It's safety. It's knowing that the monsters are truly gone, not just hiding in new masks. I'd lie awake most nights in that cabin, listening, remembering. The way Victoria used to tilt her head when she was about to punish someone. The faint sound of the back room door locking behind me. The cold tile floor under my knees. The smell of lavender oil meant to hide something darker. Even in the mountains, the ghosts followed. One morning, I stood barefoot in the frost-covered yard, staring at the pine trees while coffee steamed in my hand. The fog was thick. It reminded me of the clinic hallway in winter, the one with the frosted windows they claimed were for privacy. I remembered pressing my fingers against the glass, wondering what it would feel like to run. Now I had run. I had escaped. I had won. But that window still lived inside me. I turned to Theo and said, I have to speak. He didn't question me. He just nodded. Within days, he made the arrangements. Press, lawyers, advocates, media outlets, victim support groups. I told him I didn't want spectacle. I just wanted truth. A microphone, a podium, and the weight of silence breaking under its own shame. The press conference was scheduled for the end of the week, held at the old community center where Victoria once gave her fake empowerment talks. Poetic, really. Returning to the place she used to deceive us, but this time to expose every lie. The night before, I barely slept. I sat on the floor, going over my speech again and again. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real. Every line was something I'd buried for years. When morning came, I dressed plainly. Black slacks. A modest blouse. My hair tied back, no makeup. I didn't want to look untouchable. I wanted to look human. The car ride was silent. Theo sat beside me with his hand resting gently over mine. I squeezed it once before stepping out. Outside the community center, a sea of cameras, reporters, and survivors had gathered. Signs filled the air. We believe Nora. Silence isn't healing. Victoria stole our voices. A wave of nausea rolled over me, but I walked anyway, step by step through the crowd until I stood at the podium. Microphones buzzed. Lights flashed. The room held its breath. And then I spoke. My name is Nora Blake, I said, my voice carrying across the space like a blade. For years, I was told I was crazy, that the things I remembered weren't real, that the pain I felt was a disorder, that if I just followed the rules, I would get better. I looked into the cameras, into the homes of millions of girls who were still trapped in their own silence. I wasn't sick. I was being abused. The room was still, almost holy in its silence. I wasn't the only one. Victoria Hale made a career out of controlling and breaking young women. She wore kindness like a costume. She manipulated families. She destroyed lives. And when we screamed, she told the world it was therapy. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. These are the names of 27 women who didn't survive her system. They were silenced not just by her, but by everyone who turned a blind eye. Everyone who refused to believe. I laid the paper down on the podium. I will not let their names vanish. Then I looked out at the crowd, at the girls I had once shared walls with, the ones who escaped, the ones who testified, the ones who cried behind bathroom doors while someone on the other side counted down the minutes of their punishment. We are no longer afraid of her, I said. And we are no longer alone. The room erupted into applause. Some stood. Some cried. Some just clutched each other like survivors of the same shipwreck, finally breathing on land again. But me? I didn't cry. I closed my eyes and felt something else. Not relief. Not pride. Just readiness. Because this wasn't the end. Not yet. It was time to begin something bigger. Something no one could ever bury again. After everything unraveled, the arrests, the media chaos, the flood of public outrage, there was this strange, unexpected silence. No sirens. No shouting. No more footsteps outside my door. Just quiet. It was jarring at first. For so long, I had been trapped in noise, the kind that wasn't always loud, but constant. The hum of secrets. The ticking of threats. The way trauma buzzes under your skin even when the room is still. But this silence? It felt clean. The world had finally seen them for who they were. Victoria. Charles. Everyone who helped cover it up. Their empire of lies collapsed in a matter of days. Bank accounts frozen. Assets seized. Charles tried to flee the country, but was arrested at the airport. Victoria's charities disowned her. The smugness in her face during her trial didn't last long once the testimonies started rolling in. Not just mine. So many girls. Some now grown women. One of them looked at me on the courtroom steps and simply said, "I thought I was crazy. But now I know I wasn't." We hugged without saying anything else. The headlines called me the whistleblower, the girl who exposed the Blake family, the brave survivor. But I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. Hollowed out. Like someone had emptied me of everything I used to be, and now I had to decide who I'd become. I didn't go back to the city. I didn't stay to watch the media circus. I packed 2 bags, left quietly, and disappeared to a place no one would think to find me. A cottage by the sea. Remote. Peaceful. With old wooden floorboards and windows that sing when the wind blows through them. There's a chair on the porch where I sit every morning with tea, watching the waves roll in like breath, slow, steady, alive. I started rebuilding from there. Not just my life, but my purpose. I used some of the settlement money to start an anonymous foundation, one that funds therapy, legal aid, housing, and education for survivors of abuse and trafficking. No names. No press. Just quiet, steady help where it's needed most. I published essays under a pseudonym. I helped other women write their memoirs not to chase fame, but to reclaim ownership of their truth. Sometimes I get letters. Handwritten ones. Or emails sent through encrypted platforms. Women, some younger than I was, some older than my mother, writing things like, "You gave me the courage to speak. I left him. I finally told someone." Those messages mean more to me than any news article ever could. Theo visited a few times. He's still working in law enforcement, but with a new focus, protecting survivors instead of covering up corruption. We talked one night under the stars, and he asked me, "Do you think you'll ever be the same again?" And I looked out over the dark water and said, "I don't want to be the same. I want to be better, stronger, wiser, kinder to myself." He smiled, didn't say a word, just nodded like he understood. I still have hard days. Nights when I wake up sweating, the ghost of that cold cellar lingering on my skin. Sometimes I flinch when a door slams or when someone raises their voice. But I breathe through it. I remind myself where I am. I remind myself that I am free. Not because someone saved me, but because I fought. Because I refused to be erased. Because I turned their silence into my voice and then used that voice to light a fire no one could put out. So if you've made it to the end of my story, if you've felt anger or grief or hope swelling in your chest, please don't let it fade when the screen goes dark. Let it stay with you. Let it turn into something. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Not for fame, but so these stories, our stories, continue to be heard. Because someone out there is still locked in their silence. Still wondering if anyone would believe them. And maybe, just maybe, your share, your comment, your click could be the light at the end of someone else's tunnel. I'm Nora Blake. And I may never be whole again. But I am no longer afraid. And that's a beginning worth everything.